Sydney.
Well, thanks for coming down here, Derek. It's good to have you in
Thanks
Sydney.
for having me. I got the light, I got the bright lights, I got the view. We're ready to go. What a cool place. This is one of the coolest venues that I've ever seen to host a startup grind. So really thrilled to be up here.
That's my laptop, does
Does that
it?
mean we're not? Security's coming to throw us all out.
So is this your first time down to Australia?
It is, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I lived in New Zealand for a year and was fully brainwashed into hating Australia for a while. But now that I've been here, I love it, and spent a couple days in Melbourne, and now a couple days up here. So.
And you saw a few of the sites today?
I did. Yeah, we got out on the water and just been walking around town. Awesome. Cool. I don't know how you get any work done.
Cool. Well, let's get into it. So, Derek, tell us a little bit about your history. Where did you grow up? What school did you go to? What was the kind of area? And tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I grew up in Florida, in the southern United States. My family moved around a little bit. We lived in Europe for 6 years. I went to school at one point I was in 10 schools in 10 years. And what you learn when you move around a lot is you either make friends or you cry yourself to sleep. So I became okay at making friends. And so I went to school at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, and thankfully met my wife there. I graduated in communications and marketing. I didn't learn anything at school that was useful or practical. I attended one class that was actually useful. It was an entrepreneur lecture series class where entrepreneurs would come up and tell their story. And that ended up being a little bit of the genesis for what Startup Grind is, but that was the most useful class I took. It was half a credit, and I could have just audited it for free. But I left the school, got a job in electronic arts in product marketing, and I worked on games like Burnout and The Godfather and The Sims, Battlefield, Need for Speed. And then I left my job in 2009 in the middle of the recession to start a startup.
Cool.
And my wife had just had her first child 6 weeks after she had just had it. Yeah, really cool of me, huh? So she had 6 weeks after having our first child. As soon as I knew they were safe and healthy and everything like that, I left my wonderful insurance and set off. In the States, the health insurance is just a complete mess. And lots of things are a mess, as you're seeing right now. I saw it on the news, here's what Donald Trump said about Hillary Clinton today. I was like, oh man, are you guys really listening to this too? And, but it was, my child was a $10 baby. This is what the corporate America does to you. They give you this amazing insurance, right? It's like, I can't ever leave this job. I had a baby and it only cost me $10 US. My second child, we have 3. My second child cost me like 10 G's. And so the expectations on him are like pretty high of what he needs to be in life. It's like a lot of pressure on him. The first one can do whatever he wants, but the second one, he better not screw it up. So, but anyways, I'm talking about health insurance. Let's talk about something else.
So what made you want to leave electronic arts and do a startup?
I was working really hard inside of a big company, and what I learned, if I worked 110%, which is just kind of how I work, I could be in the top 2% of employees at EA. And I got promoted every year. When I went to quit, I was offered a double promotion to stay. But I just wasn't satisfied creatively, and I wasn't satisfied with my place inside of it. I didn't really have an impact. When I got in the company, the stock price was at 70. When I left, it was at 20. But I don't really take a lot of credit for that because I was just a low-level marketing guy, and I didn't really have 15 years in me to climb the corporate ladder. I needed to be at the top in the beginning. And when you're the CEO, you kind of, by default, go to the top. Now that your ladder's really short in the beginning, and so you kind of have to build a ladder. But I just got frustrated. I had an experience one time. I was working really, really hard. I was the first person in, last person out. And I was kind of complaining about a job that my boss had asked me to do, and I just said, I'm not an investment banker. Like, I don't get paid like an investment banker. And 5 hours later, he had pulled me back into his office and he said, hey, I went to bat for you today and we got you a $4,000 raise. I was like, okay, thanks, I guess. He's like, isn't that awesome? I'm like, no, it's not. And more, it was less about the money and more about like, this is what it takes. Like I have to complain to move up. Like what a bunch of crap. You know, like I'm killing it. You should just know to move me up and you should put me in a different trajectory than other people. And so anyways, that's what I thought, and that probably wasn't right, but.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I think there's a misconception that people go and start a startup to make 20 million bucks. And whenever I talk to startup founders, they're normally like, no, I want to create something. I want to be my own boss. I want to be the master of my own destiny. I think that sounds like the same reason.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an entrepreneur and you don't want to be rich, then you're probably not being honest about it. But like, I couldn't sleep because I had ideas and I literally would stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning just laying in bed thinking about stuff. And when I started to become an entrepreneur, I could actually sleep. I didn't go to bed till probably the same time because I was working, but at least when I finished my work, I could sleep because I just felt like, hey, I've stretched myself creatively as far as I could today. And if I want to spend a day working on something and just building something, even if it's new, I could do that. And that's worth a lot to me. It's worth a lot more than $4,000 to me.
So tell us about the startup. What was it, like Friendster or something like that? Or
the
like
first startup that I did to quit EA is just so awful. So my best friend from college is in the truck business, and I was in marketing. And so we had done some stuff together in college, and we're like, let's put our ideas together. What have we got? Can you imagine what it was? Marketing for trucks. That's exactly what it was. You should have been in it as our third co-founder. So we're going to put ads on trucks. Here's the pitch. There's like millions of trucks in the United States, and none of them have ads on it, so it's all this unused inventory. And we were going to tap into this unused inventory and sell it. This really changed the world. I'm not like the worst salesperson in the world. I'm not the best, but in 6 months I couldn't sell one. And my friend, his wife had triplets. He couldn't quit his job. He needed the insurance. So it was just me. And I just kind of woke up one day and it's like, I'm selling truck ads. And I hate trucks. Like, what am I doing? This is so stupid. And like, how did I even get into this mess? You know, I'm not even like an outdoor advertising expert or anything. I was just there. It's just, but you know, the good thing about it was for some reason, somehow, it got me to quit. And when my boss came to me as I told him I was quitting, he said, hey, we want to give you a 30% raise and a double promotion to stay. This other thing was more interesting to me than that. And it was like, wow, if I'm not like falling over myself to take that, I've got to leave, I got to run. So I ran with the trucks. I jumped on the back and held on for dear life. And it crashed shortly thereafter. So don't sell any truck ads. And then I had this friend from college who called me. He's like, hey, like I don't know what you're doing with this truck thing, but like we're starting a startup and we could really use somebody to do marketing for us. And I'm like, no, I'm totally focused on the trucks. You cannot deviate my focus. I'm selling ads. And he's like, how about like 20 hours a week? I'll just pay your bills. I'm like, well, what would you pay me? He's like, how about $80 an hour? And I was like, it's like one of those moments where you're on the phone, you know, and you know right where you are and you just like, it's like I couldn't do it for less than 85. Just couldn't. He said, okay. So I worked 20 hours a week for him, making $85 an hour. And it was something I was good at. It was what I'd done at EA. And I worked with this startup, and there were 5 people. And I got to see what it was like to be in a successful startup. I mean, you know, they were very early. It wasn't sure yet, but it was a startup called movieclips.com. Anybody ever heard of Movie Clips? Every movie trailer you watch on YouTube is a movie clips trailer. And they started with this one business idea, and then they pivoted. Anyways, the movie, I could have been their 5th employee. They offered me 1% of equity, which was very generous at the time because they'd already raised funding and things. I turned it down, and that first business sold for $20 million. And then they spun out another business, it's called Zephyr. It's in Los Angeles. It's a $500 million business. And they're, you know, my buddies from college, and I couldn't be more thrilled for them and happy for them. But I got to see it. I got to just experience it in just a small way. And And that ended up being probably worth way more than what they paid me, but he kept my doors open for a long time with that.
Cool. So we'll put truck ads down as
it's
a very near thing. That
I mean, I got the
both
deck.
investors
I've
and
got the
customers.
deck. If somebody wants to have a go at it, I'll just give it to you. And please don't ever call me or ask me about it.
So the investors just didn't get it, right?
What?
The investors didn't get it.
I didn't know. The customers didn't get it.
Nice.
Not even the investors.
So we're moving now to like startup grind. So how did it get started? I mean, you look at it now and you must sort of blink and go, how is it in 200 cities? How have we done 2,000 events around the globe? Like, how did it get started?
So about the same time, a friend and I just decided to start hosting an event in my office, and I want to call it Startup Grind because that was a hashtag I would use at 2 in the morning when I was working on something and had kind of put myself in this situation. And 9 people showed up. It was really nothing. We were brainstorming, using a whiteboard. And then it worked, so we're like, let's do it again. We did it again. We did it again and again. A monthly cadence. After about 6 months, 4 people came. And I got in my car and said, this is a huge waste of time. And I was spending 29 days out of the month working on my startup, a different startup now, and spending 1 day on the Startup Grind thing, but it was like not having any impact whatsoever except for just deviating my focus. But you know, the thing that was unique about it, that we didn't really know at the time, but we understood later, was that our values were really from the very first event, made it different. Our values, which are the Startup Grind values, they were up there earlier, but is to give more than you take, to help others before you help yourself, and to make friends. And I would go to events and sit next to somebody, and they would be like, you know, I'd be like, you know, hey, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on this, 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 and this, and this. And they'd pitch my brains out, and I'd say, oh, okay, cool. And they'd say, well, what are you working on? And I'd say, well, I'm working on this. Like, oh, I haven't heard of that. And then they'd stop talking to me. It's like, no, I have something to give. I have something to share. I came from this company and this gaming company. I could probably help you if you would just listen. And that was our mentality. Anyone that attended had something to give. And I loved how you did this featured attendees thing in the beginning, because there's some really amazing people in this room, with far greater success than I've ever had. And you know, and you don't, sometimes you can stop thinking about that, because when you're a startup, it's like the most selfish job you can ever pick, right? All you do is think about all your own problems all day long. Like, oh, I'm not gonna pay, how am I gonna close that deal? And what are the, like, you just think about yourself constantly. And it's very hard to take that focus off yourself and put it onto others. And this is why people ruin their marriages, or ruin their families, or ruin their co-founder relationships, because all they do is sit and think about all the terrible things happening to them in their startup, and there are a lot, and they happen to everyone. And you just have to get out of your own mind, and you have to think. And in an event, anywhere you go, you think about something else. How can you help someone else? There's something you can do to help everyone in this room figure it out. And that's kind of what Startup Grind was about.
So when did you decide to do Startup Grind kind of full time as opposed to?
So this is something that I have, a pattern that I've seen with great companies, is that this was a project for 2 years, and you want to keep something a project as long as you can, because once you call it a startup, you've put all this pressure on yourself that you're going to do some great huge thing, and you're going to get all this VC money and blah 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 blah. Like, but if it's a project, then it's just a side thing, and there's no expectations. And so, except for your own, which I'm sure are great. And so we just did it, and after I sat in the car that night, as I described, I just decided I was going to put real effort into it. And the next event we had 40 people, and the next event we had 60, and the next event we had 80. And then Jason Calacanis, who some of you probably know from This Week in Startups, he agreed to speak, but he said, I don't have time to do a talk, you can just interview me. I'll just show up and then I'm going to leave right after. Okay, sure, whatever, Jason. And so he showed up, and I interviewed him, and we filmed it. It's still online. And people really liked it. The feedback was really good. So we were like, let's just do that. That seemed different. It was cool. And the value proposition was good for me as an interviewer. I got to meet him, and and then he was good for him. He could just show up and leave. And then it was good for the attendees because it wasn't a sales pitch. And so so we just did that. So fast forward another 6 months. So we've now been doing almost 2 years. And we're getting 500 people RSVPing, 700 people attending the events. They're still all free. And 2 things happened. The first thing happened was we had somebody walk in. We didn't have amazing food, like we've got here tonight, but we just had this crappy American pizza. And because we're paying for it, so it's just like, sorry, like that's what we got. And this guy walked in and he stacked pizza 10 pieces high on a plate, and then he walked out before the event even started. I was like, what a jerk, first of all. And then it was like, well, why did he do that? It's like, this is not a community, this is like a homeless shelter for entrepreneurs who are starving, and it's not even good food. Like, why else would you do it unless you're literally starving? It was Domino's. You don't eat Domino's unless you are starving.
Yeah.
It's probably the same here. I heard they have Domino's here.
Yeah, because it's hard to tell where the pizza stops and the cardboard starts. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we serve the cardboard up too. So, so I just said we're not going to have people like that anymore. So we'll just start charging, and it helped cover some of the costly events. These are really these are break even at best kind of situations, but like it immediately 60% of the people came back, but it was the best 60%. All the startup losers left. They didn't come back. And that's a harsh way to say it, but that's the truth. The leeches were gone. And I'd rather have 60 great people than 300 people and a bunch of losers. And people that don't care about anyone but themselves. So that's what we did. And then the other thing that happened, I had this guy come up to the stage, and he was from LA, and he was like one of these bros from Southern California and seen the movie. He's like, bro, this was amazing, bro. And he's like, I gotta do this in LA. And I'm like, you will never represent our brand in LA. You will kill it. We'll get sued if you represent us in LA. But he came in the next day to my office, and he convinced us to just try it, and it worked. And it was like, well, if we can work with him, like, probably could work with other people. And we were like, we tried it in New York, and we're like, wow, things started working. So then, that was early 2012, so 2 years of just kind of doing it for fun, as a passion thing. And then finally I sold the company I was working on, started focusing totally on Startup Grind, which came from the way I made that decision, if that's a question you're gonna ask, I don't know, but maybe that is the question you asked. This is going off the rails. So I met with one of my mentors, and he was like, I don't know about this thing you're working on, but that Startup Grind thing that you're spending 1 day a month on, like that's kind of cool, and like people really like that. And so we just decided to spend 30 days on that instead of one, and it just kind of started to move fast, and we went from 5 chapters. 4 years ago today, we were in 5 chapters, and 6 months later, we were in 35. And it wasn't that we worked any harder on this idea than the other 12 things that I did before that failed spectacularly. It was just that this one was something people actually liked, and customers actually wanted to be involved with it, so it worked.
So there's some Startup Grind chapters in some pretty interesting places of the world,
Gnarly
right?
places.
And I suppose the global reach must amaze you sometime, but talk about some of the interesting places. I think there's one is it Kabul in Afghanistan? There's a chapter there?
Yeah, we have 200 people a month that meet in Kabul. Very diverse group, and it's we have 5 chapters in Iran. We have a chapter in the West Bank. We have a chapter in Gaza. We have in Ramallah and one in Gaza. We have chapters really everywhere, and many of those, look, we're an impact company. We're a for-profit company, but we have really specific impact metrics and as well as profit metrics, and we've always found that structure was better for us than a nonprofit structure. But doing the events in those places, we don't take any money out of them. It's just we do it purely for the love of doing it. That it's a good thing for the world, so we do it. But it's kind of been a way to connect the world that I don't think existed. In that, if you think of like the United Nations, when someone from one of these countries speaks, all the other people walk out. And in Startup Grind, when our director from Tehran spoke, when he came to February, where we do like a big event where all the directors come in, we all listened to what he had to say, and we're all friends. And you find, as an American who's lived 8 years outside the United States, I've never had a friend living in Iran. And, it's a very moderate, reasonable, intelligent person, which is basically most of the people in Iran. And, it's a good way to bridge those remove the borders that exist that are kind of superficial that our political systems have created over the years.
So you see more similarities than differences when you go to a place like Palestine, where you've got a chapter there?
I mean, it's interesting because when I went to Ramallah, actually when you drive in, no, it's not similar at all. It's completely, it's completely different from what it is here or what it is in California. But as soon as you walk in the room's the same. You walk in the room, you would have thought it was San Francisco. Just engineers or CTOs. It's just some of them don't have power most of the day to build on their ideas, let alone internet. Don't even start on internet. But it's a very harsh, difficult place to be. You have a lot of respect that they're doing it and they're trying to figure it out, and that we take for granted so many things that we have.
Cool. You obviously built a real community as I think as part of the core of Startup Grind. For people that have got a startup where community is a part of it, what are the kind of key things that you see that make a community work?
The first thing is values. That's the most important thing that we have. And I would say if you don't really get anything from this, just plan tonight to go home and figure out what your values are for your startup and write them down and put them on your website. It shouldn't take you very long.
Did you have those in the beginning for Startup Grind?
No, we didn't. And but as soon as we did, again, one of my mentors encouraged me to do this, and I went back to our garage where we were working at the time, and I took 10 minutes and wrote them down, and we got them on the website that afternoon. And that's one of, if not the most important thing we did in terms of growing, because it becomes this magnet for people like you, right? And I don't know, I always felt like values are so stupid, and like that it's just this thing that like this C-level team, they want to go and like, they don't want to work for a week, so they go on a retreat, and then they spend a bunch of money and they drink a lot, and then they come back with like a mission statement and values and whatever, and it's just like an excuse to not work. And probably that is the case in some instances, but for a startup, there's so little you have to convince people to work with you that values can become a great differentiator. Because almost nobody does this. And but we have people like, people come up to me and say, hey, I was just in Melbourne, and Chris, who runs our chapter there, has been doing it for 4 years. Some of you may know him. And people are like, hey, how did you find Chris? And I'm like, well, he found us. I didn't find Chris. He was the first person that applied for Melbourne, and we took him. And I could name you 24 cities. It was the same thing. So the first person that applied, we vetted them. But and we have a pretty robust vetting process. We get about 100 people a month that apply now, and we'll accept 5 or 10 a month. And but if they don't match our values, and we have like a system inside of you can't ask somebody what are your values. You have to go around it, right? It's like you can't ask somebody if they're a good problem solver. You ask them a difficult question and see how they would solve that problem to figure that out. And that's the same way we do it. We kind of test their values, and what we do is we say, hey, here's like 3 or 4 hours of work, go do it, and then come back. We're not going to talk to you until you're done. And a lot of people get really offended by that. Like, I'm important. What am I going to do? You're going to make me do this work? You come talk to me. You're lucky I want to be a part of this. It's like, no, it's fine. Go to a different community. But the ones that are great, they're really humble about it. And then they're like, no problem, I'll do it. And they do it, and they come back. And they're really cool, and then when they come back, we just like open up the gates for them and do everything for them. And I run the risk of saying that in an interview, but we can we've seen this thousands of times. People have applied, so we can kind of spot the people that are in it for something other than the right reasons.
You'd meet a lot of startups in your travels all around the world, but especially in the US. And some of those startups will be trying to raise capital. Now, you probably then see some down the track that would have raised capital and some wouldn't have. What are the sort of key things that you've seen about those people that's led to them raising the capital they needed to grow their business?
I mean, when I think about entrepreneurs growing their business, I focus on creating a good business. So sometimes that involves capital, and a lot of times it doesn't. We're bootstrapped. We have 15 employees and a dozen contractors. I've raised capital and lost it, and not returned someone's money. That's a really horrible feeling when you do that. it's not a feeling I really want to go through again. So we've turned down funding a bunch of times. So what I would tell entrepreneurs, especially if you're here in Sydney, you know, there's just less access to capital. And with the climate at the moment, it's only getting worse. If you had a hard time last year or the year before, it's a lot worse if you're still here. So what I would tell entrepreneurs is figure out how to run a good business, and guess what? VCs will find you. And that's been my experience. When I build good businesses, the VCs come knocking. And people I talk to, it's the same thing. Wait till they come to you, and guess what? You then have leverage. It's all about creating leverage with these people. And you can create fear, that, you know, the fear in them that they're missing out. You can create the fear in them that you're Uber and that they passed on one time, and you know, whatever. Or that they can see that the business works and they just want to get in. Great. Whatever it is, you got to create leverage. And to me, the best leverage is make them come to you. And they always do. And it's not a TechCrunch article. It's traction. It's real business. It's revenue. It's customers. Those are the things that attract venture capitalists. Cool. And you'll save so much time wasted on chasing VCs, on putting together pitch decks and all this other kind of crap. But when they come to you, you know what they say? Just throw something together quickly and then bring it back in. No worries. That's what they say. And that's what you do. You spend 5 hours on it, and you bring it back in, and they're like, oh, we got to tweak this a little bit, but no worries, it's looking really good. You know, make them come to you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, just tell us about San Francisco and the Valley and where it's at the moment. I was there sort of the second half of last year, and went down to South of Market and the Mission District, and I was like, oh my God, it's all changed. Like Optimizely got a brand new building, and Twitter's got a new building down there.
Those are nice buildings. All
these new bars, and there's queues out the restaurants, and it's like used to be this shitty kind of area that was really, but it was cheap, right? So startups headed there. Now it's got like super expensive. Is it still very frothy there? I mean, what does it feel like there at the moment?
Feels like people are nervous. Everyone's nervous. So a friend of mine who's in one of the top 3 venture capital firms told me recently that they've done one deal in his group inside of the firm in 2016. By this time last year they'd done 8. And the year before, they'd done like 12 or 14. So everyone's nervous. Everyone's waiting to see what happens. And again, the VCs all now have leverage. So it doesn't mean you can't raise. You can if you're a great business. But at the moment, everyone's just wait and see how things shake out.
So you're talking about the election, or are you talking about this maybe softening of the economy in the second half of the year?
I mean, I'm not an economist, but it's much harder now to raise funding than it was a year and a half ago. And there is less funding being invested. It feels like there are more funds. It's funny, there's like more venture capital funds, there's funds getting announced every day. I talked to somebody that's coming out of Stanford who is like a journalist at the GSB at Stanford. And I said, what are you gonna do when you get back? She's like, I think I'm gonna start a fund. I'm like, what? So, I don't know, there's a lot of money, but I think everyone's holding their chips right now. And then people like YC and others at the earliest stage, if you saw the last demo day for YC or read about it, huge focus on revenue, huge focus on customer churn, huge focus on all the real metrics of building a real business. Which makes me laugh, because these are the things from someone that runs a real business, these are the things I think about all the time. It never changed. You read this article, a lot of you guys read this, about Dropbox, who said they spend $25 million a year on employee perks that they're now scaling back. I'm sorry, $25,000 per employee per year. Wow. I don't know if that comes out to $25 million now, but $25,000 per, that's in like free food and yoga stuff and like free dry cleaning. They're bringing it all back. They're like, we want to get to profitability. It's like, this is so stupid. I mean, they're touted as like having come up with this revolutionary idea. Like, look at all the great businesses over time. This is what they always did. It's just people started listening to all these voices and outside sources and people that said they knew what was going on. You're the entrepreneur. You know what you should do to build a good business. You figure it out, right? You don't need to listen to anyone. Go get good advice and ignore it. Steve Blank is one of my mentors, and I go meet him about once a quarter and ask him for advice. He knows my business, he knows me, he knows our space better than anyone probably in the world. And I listen to him about 25% of the time. And he's one of the smartest guys in the space. So like, and he doesn't, when he suggests something, he's a good mentor. He challenges me. He doesn't let me just sit there and take it. He's like, well, do you think that's a good idea? Why or why not? And if I say yes, then it's almost like, you know, I feel like he kind of looks down on me like, oh, you're not challenging me on this. Sometimes it's good, but most of the time it's not, because I know better than him, because I'm the founder. So.
Cool. Now I know it's not 2006 anymore, and the world is a different place. It's not, the internet world's not totally focused on San Francisco. We have great companies coming out of Sydney, Melbourne, and Tel Aviv, and
absolutely
Sao Paulo, Brazil. But a lot of Aussies still feel the need to jump on a plane and go to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I did it 10 years ago because I think I wanted to see if I could cut it with the big boys. What tips would you have for Aussies that want to jump on a plane and turn up in San Francisco and go, hey, I want to live the dream?
Use Airbnb. And I'd throttle between Lyft and Uber. I know it's just Uber here, but you can find which better price you can get. If you're gonna come, then be committed to it. See, what I find in the Valley is that people don't invest in new people coming in for like 9 months, 12 months. And I've sort of followed lead on people that do this, and I find myself doing it now, but like someone will come meet with me and they've been here a month, and you just see such huge churn that like you can't invest in relationships unless people have been there and have committed to being there. And it's hard to figure it out. I have 3 kids and we live in Palo Alto, and you know, God help me if I can ever buy a home there, but you know, we've figured it out. Rent a home, do this, do that, figure some, you know, I lived free on somebody's property for a while, and we like nanny my wife and me nanny their kids, like this is, you know, 10 years ago. Like you figure it out. The people that are there have figured it out. And like, I think like being a cockroach, being resilient, like it's a war of attrition. And so if you're just gonna come in and like, most people that just come in end up leaving. So it's just like, I'm not gonna invest my time and energy and relationships into you in any meaningful way. I'll introduce you to somebody. Everybody does that. That's easy to do. If you're smart, and you're not gonna, and you're good for the person who introduces you, I'll introduce you to people. But I'm not gonna really invest in you, right? Unless I've seen you're gonna be a survivor. And it probably takes a year and a half to do that. There's a guy who I've been talking with who's came in from Brazil, and he's been in the Valley for about 18 months. And at the beginning, this is how it went with him. And he's like, I'm gonna change the world, you know. And I'm like, you go change the world, man. I'll just come back in 9 months if you're still here. And he was, and he did. And now it's been about 18 months. I talked to him the other day, and he said he has 2 kids. He's like, I'm running out of money, but I've been renting out a room in my house just to pay the bills. Now think about this. Guy in a little Palo Alto house with his wife, with his 2 kids, renting out a room, sharing a bathroom and kitchen, everything else, with this random stranger coming in there. I'm looking at some of your faces like, that doesn't sound safe. I agree. But Airbnb is really safe, so it's probably fine. But when he said that to me, I was like, you're gonna figure it out. Like, that's it. Like, that's the moment. And I said to him, like, how can I help you? Like, I mean, I say that, I mean that genuinely when I say it to people. I try to say it to everyone. But like, really, like, now I'm invested in your success, because if you're willing to go to those lengths, you have what it takes to be really successful. It takes those crazy things, right? I didn't pay myself for the first 3 years. It took me 4 years to get the salary that my boss had offered me when I turned it down. It took me 4 years to pay myself that same amount, right? We did this thing. We 2 years we lived in this house. We watched our kids. We nanny. We did all this crap. You do what you got to do. And if my wife was here, she could do Startup Grind. Like, she's like best co-founder I've ever had. And I don't know how she's let me do what I, like, if she told me go get a job, like, I can't take this anymore, it would be over. You know, but she's survived, you know, through the whole thing too. So
Look, and that's why it's called Startup Grind, right? It's not
I
called
guess so,
Startup
yeah.
Unicorn or
Yeah.
Startup Sabbatical or...
Startup easy.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a grind, right? If I look out to Liz or to Andrew or David, any of the guys that are doing their own startups, like it's a grind. It's a really hard thing. So I've always loved the name because having done it myself, I know it is a grind. And yeah, it's fun. I think it's better than working in a massive company and all that kind of stuff, but it's a grind.
I had a sponsor one time say to me like, hey, could you change the name? Because it feels kind of like a sexual thing to me. And I was like, you've never started a company, have you? And they're like, no. And I'm like, that's why you think it's sexual. You should spend less time on the internet and more time spent, starting a company. Entrepreneurs get it. It's not a negative thing. It's actually a really positive thing. And you look at Atlassian. Atlassian is the company I tell everybody to build your company like Atlassian. I mean, whether they're in Australia or not. That is the company I want to be like. I want to, when my company IPOs, I want to own 67% of the company, me and my co-founder. 67, is that right? 67.5 or 67.8? So 67.6?
7, sorry.
Like, everyone, and I saw this guy who's really, really smart in SaaS and like a really great SaaS investor, and he said, here's this blog post, and he's talking about what you do to raise your SaaS company. He's like, we can't all be Atlassian. And I was like, no, we could, if we're just really smart about it, like those guys, and really, really coveted our equity, Like, we don't take founders' equity for our starter programs or anything else because like we want founders to protect their equity like it's gold. It is gold. And you can screw it all up in the first week. And, so, and I would encourage you, if you have a bad founding team, if you haven't vested your shares and your co-founders haven't vested your shares, go home tonight and say everybody is vesting over 4 or 5 years, and or if you're in a bad structure and have a bad team, figure out how to get out of it and do something else. Because if you've screwed yourself out the gate, if you started your marathon with a broken leg and you're hamstrung by bad terms, or if you're hamstrung by a bad team, if you're hamstrung by you've raised your Series A and you've got 3% of the company and you're a founder, you're screwed. You're totally screwed. Because by the time you get to the end, you're not going to have anything. I've got a friend who's got less than 1% of the company, and he's got a multi-$100-million business. He built the whole thing. He owns less than 1%. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's just me. If you're bleeding hard and the race just started, take yourself out. Figure out what to do to fix it, even if it's really, really hard. Those things are really, really hard. But do it. It's only going to get worse. And,
Cool. You mentioned Atlassian there. When I moved to the US in 2005, I got a lot of, g'day mate, I got a lot of, that's not a knife, that's a knife. I got a lot of crop Dundee.
what is that? The Crocodile Dundee,
right?
sure. Yeah, he's
And,
great. I mean, I can't,
you
he was the president at one point, right? In Australia?
No.
Sorry,
Paul
it's a
Hogan.
joke. It's an American joke.
But, so there was this really weird perception of Australians over there, and I remember asking someone like, what vibe am I picking up? And he said, what do you think of Irish people? And I was like, I don't know, they're kind of like, they're cool and fun to go out with. He goes, yeah, that's what we think about Aussies. I'm just wondering, what's the perception of Aussies now? Has Atlassian kind of changed the perception of Australians
I
over
don't
there?
look negatively on Aussies.
Do we have a
Aussies
vibe?
are
Is there a
cool.
vibe going on? Or?
Aussies are cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like hanging out with cool people, so I don't know. I think that's a huge strength. It's an advantage, right?
Cool, yeah. I think it's...
You all seem to be very good looking, and you have blonde, beautiful hair, and I don't know. I don't know. I feel like Aussies have charisma, I don't know enough Aussies to know, do you guys have incredible grit and determination? When I think of like Irish people, I think like most of those people work insanely hard, and they'll do anything to win. Sometimes good, sometimes not.
Yeah, the guys from Buffer are Irish.
Yeah,
The guys from
there's lots of
Intercom.
Intercom,
Yeah.
Patty from Web Summit.
Yeah.
These guys are cutthroat, but they want to win, and they won't stop till they do. Those are usually, most of the great founders have those characteristics in it. So, maniacal focus on beating everybody else.
Cool. Now this month I mentioned.
Do you have that? Do Aussies have that?
Yeah, some of us do. Some of us do. And some of us like to go surfing. So yeah, it's a tough one. But I think you find the ones that succeed obviously do have that. So.
Do the Atlassian guys have that?
You know, what was interesting about the Atlassian guys is they were successful before they were on anyone's radar. So they were quite happy to be low key. And in fact, I think the richer they've got, the worse they dress. So they really like being low key. Very similar to the guys like BigCommerce, who were above a fish and chip shop in Western Sydney, decided to do a new e-commerce platform. They were just below, under the radar, and just working on their product. So I think that was really cool what they did. So now this month I mentioned before is Female Founders Month, but because you're in town, we didn't get a female founder.
Sorry.
We got you. But talk to me a little bit about how that came about and why you're doing it.
Yeah. We've got 100 female entrepreneurs speaking in 100 different cities in a 30-day period of May. I don't know any other organization in the world that does that or can do anything even close to that. We're really proud of it. We try to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. At our conferences, we have 40% of our speakers are female speakers, which is, to my knowledge, best in industry. And so we're not perfect, but there are amazing female entrepreneurs in every city in the world. And this is a way that we can shine a little bit of a light on it. And we film all the talks and put them online, and so you'll see them. If you came to this event, then you'll probably get an email that has a link to all those. So. Cool. Sorry that I crashed the Sydney party. There's probably some great female entrepreneurs in the audience that could have spoken, but anyways, we'll do it next month. Well, we can't do it next month, but maybe we can do it in July.
We'll do it. So what's next for Startup Grind? So you have a national conference in the US. You've now, I think, taken it to Europe as well.
We got to change speeds here. We're losing people. What do you guys want to hear about? Is there anything you want to hear about in particular?
Well, I can switch over some questions if you like.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's do that, and then we can go back to that if that's interesting to people. But is there anything that would be interesting for me to talk about or for us to talk about? Oh, here we go.
Okay, would you say Startup Grind is your most successful startup?
My most successful startup is my family, and it's a work in progress. So that's the honest truth. 3 kids. My wife and I just celebrated our 10th year of marriage last week. And to be honest, it's really hard not to be married to her. I love her. She's the best. But it's a lot of work. And it requires me doing stuff every single day. I try to be home for dinner every single day and get my kids to bed, and then I go back to work on my couch, like probably a lot of you. But I don't go to any other events other than Startup Grind, because I just don't like being away at night, and it's not good for me. And when I travel, I'll leave after they go to bed and take a red eye, and then sometimes if I have like a morning meeting, I'll fly and then I'll fly back, so I'll be back for dinner, like fly across the country and be back. You just do what you got to do. So, but outside of that, and that's that Startup Grind would be for sure. Cool.
I hope my wife doesn't see this. I mean, like last month I picked up the wrong kids from school. That's how often I'm home.
While we're in Hong Kong next week.
That's it, mate. Now the next question is about onboarding employees. Now I know you've got a bit of a process about this. How do you onboard new people into the Startup Grind family, and what was your kind of thinking behind it?
Well, in the beginning, it would just take anybody we could get. So like you beggars can't be choosers. And in the beginning, right, you're just trying to convince anyone that has 2 legs and a brain that what you're doing is going to be the coolest thing since sliced bread. And so literally like the first 5 people that came to us, we took them all. That had some dire consequences, but we fixed them. And and then, once we got some traction, we're losing more people. It's not good. I'll move quickly. Over time we could be more picky, and we made the process more and more difficult. And we want people to weed themselves out. We ask all the questions up front now. When you come and apply for Startup Grind, you plan the whole year in advance. And then we look at your plan and say, that's a good plan, that's a bad plan, that's a great plan, that's a we don't know yet plan, we got to ask some more questions plan.
And how do you instill the values into the new chapter directors?
Well, they have to have those values. We don't have time to teach them those values. So you got them or you don't. So we have to judge whether or not we think they have them in a strong way. It's really hard, and we don't get it right all the time. But we get it right most of the time.
Yeah, cool.
So we have kind of just the process that we go through, and we just, we'll, like I said, we try to make it difficult for them, and we see how they react to that, and if they get high and mighty about it, or if they're humble about it, and we hope they're humble. We think we're humble people, and we try to give chapters a lot, and we think we have a good offering for them, and we spend a lot on technology. We spend a lot on brand and team, and so those things play out. But if people are like, "What are you giving me? What are you giving me? What can I take? What can I take?" It's not going to work out with us.
Cool. The next question is about school, and the question is school becoming less useful these days?
I think MBAs, unless you can go to an Ivy League school, are just a complete waste of money. Absolutely 100% waste of money. You should go start a business. You'll learn way more than your MBA. That's my opinion, but if I could get into Stanford, I'd do it in a second. I don't know. Who wouldn't, I guess? It's maybe a dumb answer, but I'd love to be part of that club. Some people think YC is, like the Harvard of startups, and you pay a lot of equity to join that club. It's maybe not dissimilar to going to an Ivy League MBA program. There's a certain process that you get from going to school and just completing, and like sort of professionalism that some people like a polish almost, that I think it can take a long time to get that if you don't get any degree, but some people just don't need it, and some people do need it. Some people, it's like an ego thing too, like we need to check that box. Parents want us to check that box. So, hard to get over that stigma. It's not a bad box to check to get a four-year degree, I don't think. I think it makes a lot of sense. Figure out what you want to be, what you want to do. But I don't know about an MBA.
Cool. The next question is, I suppose, more about the sentiment in the market. It's about unicorns, and there's a lot of talk about are the unicorns dead. There's some of these large companies have had reduced valuations. What do you think about the talk of unicorns? I personally don't like the word, but I suppose it has a place.
Why don't you like the word?
I think because I think people don't set out to build a unicorn when they're a startup. They set out to build a good business or do something different or change something or have fun. I don't think anyone sets out to build a unicorn. I think that kind of just happens. So, yeah, it's like people that start talking about their exits before they've started, So.
Yeah, counting your eggs. Well, the person that coined the term unicorn is a woman named Aileen Lee, who wrote that first article on TechCrunch about it. What's interesting about her is she does not want to talk about it. I know she'll never watch this video, so I can say this. But we've asked her a number of times to give a talk about whole unicorn, methodology and the thinking and everything like that. My sense is she wants to be distanced from it because of how negative it is. And to me, that says a lot. If you're the author of it, excuse me, if you created it and you don't want to be a part of it, that's not good. So people that raised, there's this whole group of companies, right, that raised at these higher valuations just for hiring, for the branding to say we're one of those guys, we're one of those girls, and they're paying the price now. It sucks.
Cool. Now the next question is a bit of a fun one. The question is...
Sorry. Just keeping it real, guys. I don't know. I feel like I said a lot of negative things about venture capital, but you just if you're gonna raise money, just make sure it's the right decision, just it changes your world, and it's usually negative. That's just real. 90% of venture-backed companies fail. So if you're in that 10%, good on you. Go the distance like Facebook and Twitter. But most companies would be better to aim towards Atlassian than to aim towards Facebook, especially if you live here. And but VCs are great. VCs are some of the nicest, most interesting people that I've ever met, as long as you don't ask them for money. Then things kind of change. But VCs that you don't ask for money, man, they're really cool. And they know a lot of people, and they're really connected. So they can really help you a lot. Just never ask them for money. It's like a lot of people, right? As soon as you ask somebody for money, you a rich person, if you're cool with them, if the day you ask for money, you've changed the whole relationship. They may never talk to you again. They might give it to you too, but a lot of rich people don't like being asked for money because they get asked all the time. All right, sorry.
So the next question is a bit of a fun one, and I'll actually, after I ask, I'll actually answer it. I'll actually answer it first. So it's who's the biggest startup dickhead that you've met in your travels? Now, I was at a startup event in Melbourne, and I have a general question when I meet people, like, hey, what's your interest in startups? And this girl said to me, she said, I'm here to meet interesting people. And I'm like, you're dating? You're here to date? Is that what you're doing? Like, you're here to meet interesting people? Wow. They need to put the ticket prices up or something. I don't know. But have you had any weirdos or just strange experiences? You must have had a couple.
Just anyone, not speakers?
Yeah. Oh, there's a speaker.
I thought it was like a famous one. I like this guy a lot now, but I'll just share the story because it's kind of funny. But I was interviewing Dave McClure for the first time, and he's spoken at Starbrand a dozen times. He's actually got a really good heart, and who he is on stage is not really who he is off stage either, which is kind of interesting. But I'm interviewing him just like this, and we go for about 5 minutes. The room is packed, like hundreds of people. And I'm really nervous to begin with because it's Dave. And he looks at me about 5 minutes in and he goes, cuts me off, and he's like, this is effing boring, dude. And I was asking him about his life, and I was like, well, we're talking about your life, so I don't know, like, I'm just asking you, anyways. So that was like the worst moment I ever had on stage. But I think that guy with the pizza, who's progressively over the years gotten, angrier and meaner and uglier in my mind over time. I'd someday hope, like, in the next life that, like, I can go back and, like, watch, some of my life, and I can actually see what this person looks like. I'm sure he was, like, a really nice guy. I'd love to talk to him. I'd actually like to thank him because he changed everything about Startup Grind. But he sure seems like a big dick in my mind. So probably him. I don't know.
Yeah. Look, I concur on
Is that a good answer?
Yeah, that's fine. I totally agree on the Dave McClure thing. He did an interview with Jason Calcanis, and they cut together on YouTube all the cursing that he'd done through it. It's quite a fun watch.
One time I interviewed Jason, and we let his team film it, and he wouldn't release the tape after he filmed it. And I think it's because he lied in the interview about something. He claimed it was because it was too personal. I mean, which is like the dumbest, and it's like Jason, so like, but that seemed like kind of a dick thing to do. Who else? Wow, I hope no one watches this. I guess I like control the YouTube channel, so I can shut it off. No, I'm not gonna do that. Most people were cool. We had one guy, speakers that bail is never really a cool thing, and that aren't gracious about it. Like, if something happens, like, stuff happens, like, we're not unreasonable. But if you bail and you're rude about it, it's like, come on, So we have people that do that. Gosh, I'm really actually a really positive person. I've been super negative tonight. I really apologize about that. But most people are great, and I just tend to look at the good in people, so. Dave's great, Aileen's great, whoever else, Jason, he's interesting. Interesting guy. Yeah, but he was my first Startup Grind speaker, so I actually owe him a little bit.
Good stuff.
As well. He told me one time I saw him like a couple years after that, and he came to Startup Grind, and we were doing this big conference, and he's like, sorry, I'm taking your question where you didn't want it to go. I'm really sorry. But he was like, oh yeah. I was like, hey Jason, do you remember when I interviewed you a few years ago? And he was like, I hadn't seen him for 3 years. Like, oh yeah, that little thing. You had a couple people with that thing down at that crappy office in Mountain View. And I was like, actually, we had like 120 people at that event. I remember it really clearly. And he's like, yeah, whatever. It wasn't that big. And he kind of blew me off or whatever. Anyways. Not that any of this matters.
So who's the most interesting person you've interviewed?
The most interesting person I've interviewed, there are two geniuses that I've interviewed are Patrick Collison from Stripe and Matt Rogers from Nest. Those guys are geniuses. Bill Maris from Google Ventures, who not a lot of people know, but is a really brilliant guy, and knew Larry and Sergey in the garage. And if you can meet people before they're famous, it's a good time to meet people. So that's actually a good reason to become a VC. You get to meet everybody before they're famous and become friends with them then. Who else? The most interesting, George Zachary is a guy, he was the first investor in Twitter, the first investor in Yammer, Udacity. I find him to be incredibly interesting. And he talks about, he talks about this like when he like leans forward and if he feels like energy towards an idea, like how do you pick an idea? And he always says like, well, if I feel energized after talking about it, then like I keep thinking about it, then that's something I want to work on and be a part of. Or he says, if I would think I would be on the founding team, like then that would be a startup I want to invest in. But he says the opposite. If my energy goes down, I won't even look at it. I won't even think about it. Like it's dead to me.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Cool.
I think
And just one final question.
Sure.
Let you have a break. What's the best startup book you've ever read? And did you read a lot of startup books, or did you just go and try stuff?
Well, my favorite book it's kind of a life company building book, but it's How to Measure Your Life by Clay Christensen. If you haven't read that, go buy it tonight. And it basically talks about the three things you should worry about are making sure your wife doesn't hate you, making sure your wife doesn't divorce you, your kids don't hate you, and that you don't go to jail. Just focus on those three things, it'll all work out. And the best startup book I've read is, the most impactful one is 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Steve Blank. Totally rocked my world after failing a few startups. I think Ben Horowitz's book is pretty good. Right now I'm reading a book about called The Miracle of Menlo Park about Thomas Edison. It's a pretty fascinating book. It's not the best, but it's pretty good. I'm reading that Andy Grove book, who just passed away recently. I've never read his book, which is pretty interesting. And Ben Horowitz says it's the best business book that exists. Innovator's Dilemma by Clay Christensen. It's ranked as one of the best business books of all time. So our mics are going static, so we should shut up. We're done.
Cool. Well, Derek, thanks so much for coming down to Sydney. Please join me in welcoming Derek Andersen. Thank you, Derek Andersen.